Hello, YouTube viewers, and welcome once again to my channel, CCM Drummer. My name is Matthew Jackson, and I'm continuing my series, my video series called a Solemn Warning About Spencer Smith, and this would be part two. And in part two, I'm going to talk about his book, Calling Evil Good, The Lie of Christian Rock and Roll. In part one, I talked about the introduction, his opening statement in his 21-minute video called A Solemn Warning About the Jesus Music Movie. And I made the distinction between orthodoxy and tradition. So if you haven't seen that part, you feel free to go back and see that part one. So, yeah, I'm going to talk about his book, Calling Evil Good. But before I do, please feel free to like, comment, share, and subscribe to my channel. And so let's get started on the book. Now, in part one, I accidentally called Spencer's book Calling Good Evil. I did it on two occasions, actually. So I had a momentary dyslexia there. But my apologies. It is Calling Evil Good, The Lie of Christian Rock and Roll. That is the proper title. The book was published by Hilltop Publications, and it was published in January of 2018. Now, if you go to Hilltop Publications website, they bill themselves as they say, we offer scripturally correct books written by scripturally Baptist authors. Now, I went to the bookstore in the Hilltop Publications website, and I discovered that the Hilltop Publications website is no longer carrying the book. So if you wanted to actually buy this book, you'd have to do it on Amazon or another carrier, but you can't go to Hilltop Publications. I actually called Hilltop Publications, talked to a gentleman by the name of Pastor Timothy Lotion, and he told me that Hilltop Publications is no longer carrying his book, but wouldn't get into details. All I can say is that originally Hilltop Publications did publish it. That's a matter of public record, but I don't know why they're no longer carrying the book. But so anyway, that's all I'm going to have to say about that. Now, I did peruse his book, at least the first dozen or so pages. And the first red flag that I noticed about Spencer's book is that on the cover, it reads, Calling Evil Good, The Lie of Christian Rock and Roll. And if you go and read the featured endorsement on the back cover, it talks about CCM. The featured endorsement was written by a fellow by the name of Brian R. Jackson. He's the senior pastor of Broadway Baptist Church in Muskegon, Michigan. So, and then you read in the book, at least the first few, at least the introduction in the chapter and the foreword. That's as far as I got. The terms Christian rock and roll or Christian rock is used interchangeably with CCM. So as the reader, I was a little confused. Like, what is he talking about? Is his beef with Christian rock and roll, or is his beef with CCM, contemporary Christian music as a whole? And that made me wonder as a reader, well, does he really know the difference between Christian rock and roll and CCM? Because there is a difference. Now, for those of you, just to provide the backdrop here, Christian contemporary or contemporary Christian music is an umbrella genre that covers multiple genres. and Christian rock or Christian rock and roll would be one facet of CCM under the entire umbrella of CCM. That's just one slither of CCM. Uh-oh, we got the announcement here. Excuse me, folks. We're at an airport terminal and things like this happen. Okay, so I don't think they interrupted me too bad. But yeah, you have Christian country, you have pop music, mainstream pop that takes on some facets, or CCM music will take on some facets of pop, country, rock. It's a whole mixture of things. You could have Christian reggae, you could have Christian jazz, so when you read the cover of the live Christian rock and roll, well, what about Christian country? Is that a lie too? Is Christian jazz or Christian reggae a lie? So why is he on the cover of the book singling out rock and roll, where the rest of the book he'll say CCM, and then other times he'll go back to Christian rock? That's kind of confusing for me as the reader, and it makes me suspect of his judgment. Does Spencer Smith even know the difference between Christian rock and CCM? I don't know. Now, one thing that made me suspect that he doesn't know the difference, one thing he said about Johnny Cash, and this would be in minute 8 and 45 seconds into the video, he said that Johnny Cash was singing in Billy Graham crusades as a rock star. Really? A rock star? Johnny Cash. Okay. Now let me make it clear. Johnny Cash did do some rock and roll back in the 50s. Okay. He is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Okay. But he's also in the Country Music Hall of Fame. And he's more well known for being a country artist than a rock and roll artist. So, and then if you go look at some of the songs, I could only find 3 songs. Now, in all fairness, Johnny Cash and Johnny and June Cash were good friends with Billy and Ruth Graham. Okay, they've even stayed at their house, so they were very good friends. And Johnny Cash has been is sang songs in over 24 Billy Graham crusades. Okay, now on YouTube I could only find 3 songs that he actually sang at a Billy Graham crusade. None of them were rock and roll. I mean, we're talking, it was more a Southern gospel type genre, not rock and roll. So, and the songs were Over the Next Hill, We'll Be Home, Peace in the Valley, One of These Days I'm Going to Talk to Paul. Those don't sound like titles that'll get you in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame to me. Those were not rock songs. I actually heard them. And I would venture a guess that probably none of the other songs that I didn't listen to were rock and roll either. So the fact that he would loosely and flippantly say that Johnny Cash was a rock star, excuse me, sorry about the interruption here. Anyway, yeah, I'm at the airport terminal waiting for my flight to go back to the United States. I'm going to go to the United States for 3 weeks visit. And hopefully I'll catch the Jesus music movie while I'm in the States. We'll see. And I'll give you a review on a separate video about that. So, yeah, that makes me suspect that he, of his knowledge of modern pop music and CCM music in general, and the various genres, not only in modern pop music, but within CCM as well. It makes me wonder about his musical background and credentials. One thing um, the featured endorser, Brian R. Jackson, said on his featured endorsement on the back cover of the book, he said, missionary Spencer Smith confronts the issues with a loving approach that instructs the reader on public and private biblical standards concerning music. Oh, really? Now there's biblical standards for music. Now, if there's biblical standards for lyrics, yeah, I get that. But biblical standards for music, really? And Also, on page 7, paragraph 2 of Spencer's book, he made a moral equivalence between rock music and drunkenness, adultery, fornication, violent crimes, and drugs. Spencer actually said, well, if you want to witness to a criminal who does violent crime, would you commit violent crimes yourself? Or if you're ministering to alcoholics or drunks, would you become a drunkard yourself in order to minister? And he says, well, you don't use rock and roll. So he made those vices and those sins on the same moral equivalency as rock and roll. And so I beg to differ that, because here's the thing about music. Music itself is amoral. And if you start attaching a moral value to a particular genre of music and saying, well, that's bad, then you have to come up with a criteria for what constitutes bad music versus what constitutes good music. And when you get into that, you're really approaching a slippery slope. That's not a good idea, because there's a lot of songs in CCM that are soft ballads, slow tempo ballads that are not hardly any rock and roll at all. Then you got some soft rock, and then you got mainstream pop, and then groups like Striper and Resurrection Band. Yeah, you could say those are full on hard rock and roll, or what would you call heavy metal, or you just call it metal today. You don't even need to say heavy. When you say metal, it automatically implies very hard rock, very heavy metal. So only a slither of CCM music has that kind of rock and roll. The rest of it's more middle of the road. And so that's basically my input about Spencer's book. In closing, I think what Spencer needs to do is he needs to get his nomenclature straight. If he's got a beef with CCM as a whole, then he needs to change the title to The Lie of CCM Music. If he's just talking about the rock and roll part of CCM music and is not talking about CCM as a whole, then he needs to make that clear to his reader that that's what his beef is. But he's all over the place, and I'm left wondering what what his beef is. And of course, I question his musical credentials. Now, I know that he does play guitar, play piano, and sing. I don't know how well. I don't know how many genres he can play in other than the acceptable genre in an independent fundamentalist Baptist church. So just the way he was so loose and vague makes me suspect. So, yeah, if he ever plans on doing a second edition of his book, he may want to go back and straighten out his nomenclature and get his nomenclature straight and let his reader know what specifically he's going after. So that's basically all I have to say about his book, Calling Evil Good, The Lie of Christian Rock and Roll. In my next video, this will be part 3. I'm going to be talking about his comments about Elvis Presley and Larry Norman, what he said about those guys. And it's kind of ridiculous. So anyway, thank you for watching. Also, please feel free to check out my drum covers, CCM Drummer. I am a drummer. I cover CCM songs. That's my specialty. So this channel, CCM Drummer, addresses CCM music and drums. So that's my commentary on that. So thank you for watching, and stay tuned for part 3. God bless.